In this video, we're going to take a look at the paperwork and documents that are required in order to undertake an overland vehicle expedition. So when it comes to the paperwork side of expedition planning, this is one area that does concern an awful lot of people, but it's not actually as complicated as you might think. There are really only two elements to it. There's the customs side that deals with your vehicle and the immigration side that deals with your team. Now, so you don't have to sit there and jot down notes as I'm talking, you'll find details in the description box below, as well as links to useful websites. When you head overseas to Africa, Asia or South America, there are an awful lot of countries, so you will be crossing a lot of borders. Now, Africa, for example, has 54 countries, and when we did the London to Cape Town record, we went through 20 countries in just 11 days. So having somewhere safe to keep all of your paperwork and your documents is very important. So what we do is we use these sort of big A4 sort of business folders. So we found them incredibly useful, and as I do this kind of thing for a job, I have another one which I use for all of my receipts. What you're going to need inside this folder are some plastic sleeves. Hopefully you can see them there. So everything is kind of in plastic sleeves, or for the smaller stuff it's in wallets. Now what you will also need are some sticky labels, so you can write on the top here what everything is, and a black marker pen. So that's that side of things. So what we'll do is we'll go through each and every item. Now what I am going to refer to my notes purely because there is an awful lot of stuff in. I don't want to miss out anything. So if I keep looking down, I do apologise, but I don't want to miss anything, just to ensure you guys can get as much information out of this as possible. So you need somewhere safe to keep it. You do not want to lose stuff. So having one briefcase like this, or a case like this, is incredibly important. You'll also find that you're always going to need pens, because every time you arrive at a new country, there will be immigration and customs paperwork that you're going to have to fill in. So make sure you've got a pen, at least one per person in your team. Make copies of all of your documents, okay? You want scanned copies that you carry with you. If there's a convoy of vehicles, you're going to want the other vehicles to be taking scanned copies, because if anything happened to your vehicle, if it got stolen, they would still have copies. You want digital versions as well, so you'll be looking at emailing these to yourself so that you can gain access to them if you were to lose anything, but also if you have sort of an operations base, someone who you can rely on back home to sort of help you if you ran into any trouble, make sure they have a digital copy as well, because to get a new passport is a lot easier if somebody knows who you are, what your old passport number is, when it expired, and all the rest of it. And it's the same with vehicle documents. So when it comes to arriving at a new border and having to deal with the customs side of things, the most important document that you'll be carrying with you is your vehicle registration document. Now here in the UK, this is what an original one looks like. Now it's incredibly important that you never ever lose this document. And the best way of not losing it is to never hand it over to anybody. And so what we do is we get many copies made. And we'll just go to a local printers, explain why we do need them. We're not trying to do anything fraudulent here in the UK, to explain why when you go overseas you can find some rather unscrupulous customs officers or police officers that will take this off you and then basically want a bit of a backhander before they will return it to you and allow you to go on your way. And so what we'll do is we'll only ever hand over copies. We will never ever hand over the original. Now, if you're looking at these two here in the UK, it doesn't take too much to realise that that's the original and that's a copy. But if you're in somewhere like Mongolia, Turkmenistan, the Congo, the border officials there are not going to know whether this is genuine or not, and they're quite happy to accept this. And so our genuine vehicle registration documents have never ever been handed over to anybody. So the V5 will contain information such as registration number, engine type, engine capacity, date of registration, who owns it, and all the rest of it. One thing it will have is engine number and chassis number. Now, it's very important that you do actually check this before you head overseas. When we were going to do our original London to Cape Town trip, I had an ex-police Land Rover, and we did the reconnaissance trip, and I thought, well, I just better double check to make sure it's all legit. Now, you'd think as a ex-police vehicle it would be, but it wasn't. They put a new engine in it and hadn't informed the issuing authority, and here in the UK this is called DVLA, and so it was a completely different engine number to the one that was actually in the vehicle. And customs and police en route will regularly check this. So it's incredibly important that you do make sure that this document is as per your vehicle. So engine number, chassis number, number of seats, paint colour, etc., registration number. Make sure it does actually all tie in, because they're quite hot on stuff like that. Now, the other document that will help ease your passage across certain borders is the ICMV, the International Certificate for Motor Vehicles. So basically what this is, it's a translation of your vehicle registration document. Now, it's only actually legally required in 3 countries. That's Liechtenstein, here in Europe, Somalia in East Africa, and Mexico. Now, what it does though, it does help at certain places for customs officials and police officers to understand what this is. Now, this is obviously written in English, so if you arrive at, say, an Arabic country, English writing is just a load of scribbles to them, in the same way as if I looked at Arabic, I wouldn't have a clue what it is. And so what this document does, it simply translates key information from Arabic. It explains what they're going to look for here, like what is the engine number, what is the chassis number, whether the engine is petrol or diesel. And so it's written in multiple languages, and it'll explain each section, so a customs officer, it does help it. Here in the UK, we would get them from the DVLA. It used to be our automobile associations, the AA and the RAC, but they no longer are allowed to issue them. So it's just DVLA, whereas they used to have a cost before, they're now free. So I will leave a link to the website below, and then you'll probably need 3 or 4 weeks in order to apply for one. If you can, get a couple. Exactly the same as why we carry several V5 copies, just in case someone was to think it was an official document and take it away from you. Quite useful to have. So that's the other one, but it's not essential, but it can help just smooth your passage across certain borders. I think for a lot of people, the most daunting of all documents regarding their vehicle and customs is the Carnet de Passage. But again, it's not actually that complicated. It's quite expensive to obtain, but when you've actually got it, and once you've crossed certain borders, you'll soon realise it's incredibly easy to use. So the first thing is, what is it? It's basically a passport for your vehicle. It's to ensure that you do not have to pay any temporary import duties when entering a country, but it also demonstrates to that country's customs authorities that any customs duties will be honoured if for any reason your vehicle does not leave the country. So I'm going to refer to my notes for this next bit, just to make sure that I hand over as much information I can about how this whole thing works. So the first thing is, which countries require one? Well, there's quite a lot, mainly in Africa and a few in Asia. But what I'll do is I will leave a list of those countries in the description box below, as well as some other useful links to websites that also list which countries require a carnet. So the question is, where can you get one from? You can only get one from your home country in terms of an organisation that has the authority to issue them. So it's the FIA that determines which organisation is allowed to issue a carnet. It used to be in the UK, the Automobile Association, the AA, and the Royal Automobile Club, the RAC. But again, in recent years, they are no longer allowed to issue carnets. So for us here in the UK, there's a company called Cars UK. So they have taken over in the issuing of the Carnet de Passage. So I'll leave links to the FIA website and also to Cars UK, because they're the people you need to speak to in terms of getting hold of one of these things. Now, what is it going to cost you? Well, this is where it all starts getting a bit expensive. So it's basically like a checkbook. And there are different versions. There's a 5-page, a 10-page and a 25-page version. So it does depend on how many countries you're going to travel through that require a carnet, or how long you're going to be overseas for. It comes in 3 sections, and as you enter each section, you have your import part stamped, and then kind of like the check stub bit stamped on entry. When you leave, you have the next section stamped, which demonstrates that your vehicle has left the country, and you have that stamped in the sort of the check stub side as well. So basically you'll end up with 2 stamps, one to say you've imported it and one to say you've exported it. And really, that's it. So you're looking at £217 for the 5-page version, £232 for the 10-page, and £257 for the 25-page. But that's just for the document. Now, there's also duties to be paid, and this is based on the value of the vehicle, the base value of the vehicle. It's got nothing to do with the modifications you've done to it, the restoration you've done to it, the accessories you've bolted onto it. It's purely sort of the base market value of that vehicle. So you could have a £2,000 or £3,000 roof tent and a winch and a load of other trick kit, but luckily that doesn't really count into its overall value. Now, there are 2 ways of paying or covering this customs duty. You can either do it through an insurance premium, or you can do it through a cash deposit. Now, I've got 3 examples here: a vehicle worth £5,000, £10,000 and £20,000. And different countries impose different customs duties if for any reason your vehicle was to not leave their country. And the worst one of all is Egypt, which imposes an 800% duty on your vehicle. So if you were to take a £10,000 vehicle into Egypt and for any reason it wasn't to leave the country, then the Egyptian authorities would charge the issuing authority, Cars UK, an £80,000 bill, because you've basically illegally imported your vehicle into the country. And it's to stop sort of an illegal vehicle trade going on. It's to protect their own established car industry and to stop people just taking stuff in, flogging vehicles, flying home. So an £80,000 bill, then that's going to really put a pay to any illegal motoring trade straight away. So if you do it through an insurance premium, in the same way as if you had a £20,000 car, you wouldn't pay £20,000 a year insurance every year. You'd pay £1,000 insurance in order to drive your car on the road. And if it got written off, the insurance company would pay the money. It's basically the same sort of setup. So I'll list this all, but I'll give you some examples. So a £5,000 vehicle travelling through West Africa, which has a 250% customs duty, so 2.5 times the value of your vehicle. You'd be looking at an insurance premium of £1,929, which you have to pay up front, plus the cost of the actual book itself, which is anywhere between £200 and £250. And if the vehicle successfully returns home, then you would be refunded £1,250. So that equates to £679 for the customs duty, for the insurance premium, plus whatever it would be, £257 for a 25-page book. Now, if you're going to Egypt, though, with a £5,000 vehicle, that goes from £1,900 to £2,769, with £1,250 refunded if it returned home to the UK, which basically costs you £1,500 to drive a vehicle through Egypt. Now, if you're doing something like a Trans-Africa record and you're going through Egypt and you're going to be there within 1 or 2 days, that's an awful lot of money to pay just to be in a country for a very, very short time. So the value of the vehicle has a bearing on the carnet. The countries you wish to travel through has a bearing on the carnet. So this might determine, before you even set off or make grandiose plans of how you're going to travel around the world, if you are on a limited budget, you want to check this out first, because it could basically decide where you can and cannot afford to travel. So going right up to the worst case scenario, say would be a £20,000 vehicle, which isn't actually that much money. It's certainly not even a new vehicle when it comes to sort of the more modern 4x4s, but a £20,000 vehicle travelling through Egypt with its 800%, its 8 times customs duty, they would want £4,000 off you, £4,068. You get £1,250 back, so that's £2,818 you would have to pay for your carnet, plus anywhere between £217 and £257. So that's a lot of money. The other option, if you have a heftier bank balance and you don't want to pay the insurance premium, is to put a cash deposit with the issuing authority, with Cars UK. So the way they do it is any vehicle valued up to £24,000, so that can be from a 250 quid banger right up to £24,000, it's all the same. They would want a cash deposit of £4,500 placed into their bank account. If your vehicle successfully returned home and you returned the carnet back to them, they would give you £4,000 back. Okay, so that's for West Africa, well, that's for most countries excluding Egypt. If you were to want to take your vehicle through Egypt, even a 500 quid banger, anything up to £24,000, you would be looking at £8,000 cash deposit, of which £7,500 is refundable. Okay, so quite a lot of money when it comes to dealing with carnets. Now, that then leads on to briefly vehicle choice. Because it's all based on the value of the vehicle, this is another advantage why older vehicles are more suited to overland travel. As well as being, they're simpler, they're more mechanical, less electronic, they're far easier for the locals to fix and get parts for. You don't need diagnostic equipment, you don't need laptops, you don't need highly trained technicians. It has a bearing on the carnet. So the cost of that is also relevant to the advantage of taking older vehicles. Now, how long does this carnet last for? It lasts for 1 year, or until you've crossed through 25 countries that require a carnet to be used, and then you'll have to apply for another one. So same again, you have to return this one and pay all over again. Now, what we also have, again, in the same way as the ICMV, the International Certificate for Motor Vehicles, helps border officials and police officers sort of translate your vehicle registration document, you can get hold of an Arabic version. And basically, this just explains in Arabic what all the different scribbles are that have been written on your carnet. So this was given to us by the RAC on a previous project. I'll have to check whether Cars UK can get hold of them, but it's got an FIA stamp on it, so I would imagine the FIA are still able to get hold of these for you. Or if you're struggling with it, what I can do is I can basically scan this in and I can email it to anyone who thinks this might be useful if they are heading towards an Arabic country. Now, as I briefly said, it's a 3-part system. You'll see that your vehicle documents, the name of the registered keeper of the vehicle and their home address is all listed down the left-hand side. It describes the colour of the vehicle, the engine number, it's got the chassis number, the weight, the year of manufacture. It even tells you how many spare wheels I'm carrying. Why a border official would need to know that? Maybe there is a bit of a black market trade in flogging spare wheels in certain parts of the world. And then all the stamping side goes down the right, and that would then be torn off like this, and customs on entry to a country would retain that and enter all that information into their computer. You've got to make sure that you get the check stub bit stamped. Now you could end up going through customs, driving out the main gate, and the guy on the gate forgot to double check. Normally they do make sure that's been checked. But you've got to make sure that this first bit, the left-hand side bit of the check stub, has been stamped and signed and dated and whatever else, to make sure that you've officially imported the vehicle through the CARNET system. When you leave the country, then the customs official on exit will take an identical piece of paper. It's probably got exit as opposed to entry written on it, and they will take that and enter the information into their computer, and when the two tally up, entry and exit, then you're free to go. But the same thing, make sure you get the exit stamp stamped, or the exit side stamped as well, because when you're going across no man's land to the next customs post, the next border post, they're going to want to see that you've officially exported the vehicle from their neighbouring country. So just make sure and take it upon yourselves to do that, because a lot of these border guards might be new. They might not know how a CARNET works because just it's local traffic going to and from. So just make sure that you are happy that both sides have been stamped. And when you finally return your vehicle back to the UK or to your home country, then you'll get a stamp from your home country's customs officials, and then you can return this back to your issuing authority, and only then will they give you a refund once they see that it's been stamped. Now, some countries don't use the CARNET system at all, and to be quite honest, most of the world doesn't use the CARNET system. A lot of them you'll just be allowed to travel through with no payment of anything at all, and that's the way it goes. Some countries will actually stamp a little car symbol in your passport to make sure they know that you haven't driven in, jumped on a plane and tried to fly out without the vehicle. So if you are on a journey where some of your team members do plan to only go so far and fly home, just make sure that when they're crossing the border, that little stamp doesn't get put into their passport, because they'll arrive at the airport, they'll see the little car symbol, they'll say, well, you came in with a car, where is it? You're now jumping on a plane. Make sure that it doesn't get put into their passport. Declare yourself as the driver. The chauffeur is one word to use to help hopefully let customs officials know that you are the driver. The vehicle registration documents are all in your name and you will be leaving with the vehicle. So other countries though, like China, don't use the CARNET but do require a customs deposit. Now it used to be 50% the value of the vehicle. So when we did this extreme driving series for Discovery Channel, we had two brand new Nissan Patrols, each valued at £35,000. So we had to lodge a £35,000 bond with the Chinese customs authorities, and that money was only returned to us once the vehicle had left the country and 1 month after the vehicle had left the country. But I've been speaking to my Chinese colleagues only yesterday, and apparently that has changed. Now, if your vehicle is of an engine capacity of 4 litres or over, it's not 50% anymore customs duty. It's now between 100 and 150% the value of the vehicle. So, excuse my maths, but certainly for 100%, that's £70,000. What's that going to be? £105,000 customs duty that you've got to lodge with the Chinese authorities. So another reason why older vehicles, less value, there are just so many advantages as to why you should be thinking old vehicles, cheap vehicles, not new high-tech vehicles. So that's certainly one to think about if you've got any plans of going through China. So vehicle insurance, that's another one that does confuse quite a few people. So what we do here in the UK is our insurance, and we would carry an insurance certificate, currently allows us to have the same level of cover throughout all of the EU. So that's most of Europe. Once you leave the borders of the EU, though, you have to buy insurance at the border. And this is only a third-party policy. So there's no fully comprehensive element. If your car catches fire, if your car gets damaged, then there will be no insurance cover whatsoever. It's purely third-party. It covers the other person that you might have inflicted an injury or damage to their vehicle. So some companies, though, like Alessi, and I'll leave their website below, they offer this third-party insurance. They don't offer fully comp, they offer third-party insurance. But I've never used it, but my question is, would a country in the Stans, Mongolia, Africa, South America recognize a document that had been written and issued in Holland? Probably not. It's not going to be in the language. It's not necessarily going to be on the sort of paper that they're familiar with recognizing from other motorists that are driving in their country. So I'd be probably inclined to just stick to buying third-party insurance at the border. Do not try and dodge it, because police, that's the first thing they check. Every checkpoint, they're going to want to know, where is your insurance documents? So again, with a nice case, individual sleeves, make sure you've got different insurance policies placed in clearly in this folder so that you don't lose it. And as you're going through each country, you'll end up with different insurance certificates for each individual country. Now, we have had incidents where we were using a guide. I think we were in Kazakhstan. We thought that our insurance that we'd purchased in Uzbekistan would cover us across, or that's what we were told. We got a long way across Kazakhstan before we were stopped at a police checkpoint and realised that our insurance policy wasn't valid. Not only did we incur a fine, but a big problem of having to go all the way back, and it was about 5 days away, back to the border crossing where we entered Kazakhstan to buy the insurance policy. Our guide was not aware of the situation. Now, that meant having a quiet word with the police officer in a little side room, and lots of dollars were handed over to make sure we could get away with that one, because we had to stick to the schedule. Don't try and dodge it. Make sure you've got it. Ask around. Somebody somewhere will speak English and have half an idea, but make sure that you do not enter a country fully unless you've got insurance for it there. Now, there is one company, Clements Worldwide, claim to offer fully comprehensive insurance. So insurance for your vehicle, if it was to get damaged, if it was to catch on fire, whatever, it would cover that. I've tried speaking to them. I've tried getting a quote for one of our vehicles. They don't want to know. So normally, taking your vehicle overseas, it tends to be just at your risk if it was to get damaged or written off. Now, other countries, you'll find that their insurance policies are incredibly expensive. London to Cape Town record attempt, we went through Serbia. It was the shortest, the quickest, the fastest way to get us all the way down to Saudi Arabia and the ferry across to Sudan. Now, we were only in Serbia for 6 hours, but their insurance policy that you have to buy at the border is for a minimum of 1 month, because they think you're doing a bit of a tour. We just literally raced through it. So that cost us £120, and that was back in 2010. So some policies can be expensive. Belarus is the same. They're not part of the EU. You have to go through Belarus, or you would think you'd have to go through Belarus in order to get to Russia and Moscow. But again, it's a very expensive insurance policy. It's a slow border. You're better off probably sticking to the Baltic states of Lithuania and Latvia and going all the way around Belarus and coming in towards Moscow that way. So that's kind of something worth checking out. Certain African countries, I think there is, I think they call it the yellow card or a brown card. there are certain sort of groups of countries that are sort of kind of clubbed together, and so one policy will take you across many borders. So that's a more official system than if you were, say, going to try and get something from Holland and then you were going to take that to Mongolia. They probably wouldn't recognise it. So just double check. If you are going to go through multiple countries in a certain region of Africa, South America, Asia, just double check that the policy does transfer across and not make the same mistake as we did when we thought Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan were linked. They weren't for that particular policy. Now when it comes to crossing borders, it's always easier and the passage is always smoother if the person who owns the vehicle is actually driving the vehicle, but that's not always possible. Sometimes you could be driving a friend's vehicle, you could be driving a hire vehicle, you could be driving a company vehicle. So what you're going to need is you're going to need some form of letter of authority from the owner of the vehicle giving you permission in order to drive that vehicle and take it overseas. Basically, you haven't stolen it off them. And so when we did the Vauxhall project and we went from the UK all the way to Magadan in Far Eastern Siberia to demonstrate how tough the new Vivaro van was, all three vehicles were owned by Vauxhall themselves. And so what we had was a letter of authority made up. It detailed the registration number, the name of the owner and their address. It was on official company headed paper. And it listed the names of all the people that had authority to be driving or in that vehicle. So their full name as per their passport, the fact that we were GB, all British citizens, and our passport number, and then it was all signed off. And a lot of countries, particularly Africa, they do like to see a good old-fashioned sort of rubber stamp, or better still, a nice waxed seal. It always looks really official, and they will take anything with a rubber stamp or a wax seal on it as being absolutely 100% official. So that's a good one to get done. So you're going to need that. And same again, lots and lots of copies done, so that if you arrive at police checkpoints and they want to keep a copy of who's passed through, you can leave that with them. So that's one. Now the other ones we've made up were from different motoring organisations. So as well as Vauxhall themselves saying we have permission to drive the vehicle, I got, well, I didn't get them to do it. I just happened to have an old document from the RAC, our Royal Automobile Club. So I removed all the middle bit, leaving their headed paper and a signature, and I just filled in the blank myself. Totally illegal, but in Turkmenistan they're not going to know. So same again, I just basically said, to whom it may concern, these following people have the authority to drive, and it was all signed off. So I had one of those done, and then because a lot of the countries on the way there, certainly from crikey, sort of Serbia, Bulgaria onwards, almost everybody, near enough, the Turks wouldn't, but everyone else would speak Russian. Then we had a Russian version made up. So one of my colleagues in Siberia, I sent the original and I said, can you just write it all out for me in Russian? And we had many of those made up as well. So lots of official looking documents giving us permission to drive those vehicles through. It's better though that you as the driver are also the registered keeper, so that a vehicle registration document can match up with a passport name and a driving license. It's all the same. That's always the best way to do it. Road tax in the UK is only for the UK. So if you're going on a long trip of many months, as soon as you've left the UK shores, phone up DVLA and cancel it. Try and get, you might as well get some money back into your bank account. If you're in a country that has a road tax disc in the window, I would probably remove that. Certainly if it was to go out of date, the officials might not know what that is. They might think it refers to the vehicle's roadworthiness, and therefore if it's out of date, you know, maybe the vehicle shouldn't be on the road. So anything like that, I just kind of remove it from the window. the MOT here in the UK is a sort of an annual test of vehicle safety and roadworthiness. I've never been stopped and asked if the vehicle is roadworthy. Police officers might check it, kick the tyres, check the lights, make sure the horn works and all the rest of it. But it could be worth taking a copy. I wouldn't take the original, but just take a copy just in case at any point somebody might want to make sure or query the safety of the vehicle you're driving. You'd have an official looking bit of paper to say it's been checked, it's in date and all the rest of it. There could be a whole load of other taxes. For example, you might have to pay road tax, diesel tax, customs entry fees, but we're not talking the big Chinese ones or the CARNET costs, but they could be small customs entry fees, customs exit fees, environmental taxes, carbon taxes, departure taxes. Not quite sure how that differs to exit taxes, but they do in some countries, road tolls and bridge tolls. Now, every country is going to be different and it's all going to change, and it's going to depend on you, it's going to depend on your vehicle, the number of seats. A lot of it's to do with the engine size. So if you can get smaller engine vehicles as opposed to big gas guzzling 4 litre plus size, then that's going to be better. But you're just going to have to pay. A lot of countries will want foreign currency, and the absolute international currency of choice when overlanding is the good US dollar. That is pretty much recognised absolutely everywhere. These are the ones you want. Don't take, you know, other currencies. Just have lots of US dollars, because a lot of banks won't change anything but US dollars. A lot of payment, they want it in US dollars. So that's the one to go for. Now that is slowly, it will never be replaced, but slowly being caught up by the euro. A lot of countries will now accept euros and recognise that, but really this is the one that countries want. So a lot of US dollars, hide them on your person, hide them amongst your team, hide them in the vehicle, but you are going to need to take ready cash with you. Because what's going to happen is if you're constantly going to banks taking out money, one, you'll keep incurring commission and basically charges for taking money out, and then you could keep ending up being left with a whole load of currency that when you leave the country, they're not going to give it back to you. They're not going to give you US dollars for their old currency. They're going to keep the US dollars and just say, terribly sorry, you're going to have to go and spend it. We don't want our own currency back. So US dollars and euros. So I take a bit of both, but primarily US dollars. So when it comes to all these other sort of custom certificates that you might be given on entry, don't lose them, because there's every chance you're going to need to show them on exit. So have another document or another folder inside your case with all your entry and exit certificates. And that will also be the same for hotels. A lot of hotels, if you are staying there, or even lodges, they will take your passport off you and give you a certificate, which you can then use to return the next morning or the next day and get your passport back. But a lot of it will just be to show where you stayed. It's proof of where you stayed. A lot of countries are very controlling and they want to keep track of foreign tourists. So just keep everything nice and neat, separate sections so that you know what it is, even possibly write on the back of it where it was, when it was given to you. If you're keeping fuel receipts, write on them immediately, because a lot of this, you know, this is all in Russian. I haven't got a clue, you know, what it means. I don't even know what date it was written on, but of course I've written on the back of everything. So that's a useful one to have as well.